Greetings and welcome to another exciting episode of Analogpod. I'm your host, Leonard Carillo, and together we're going to explore, probe, and celebrate the passions and very interesting journeys of artists and musicians from across the fruited plain. Today, I'm very excited to have with us a renowned drummer and percussionist, as well as a wonderful friend of mine, and also a fellow bandmate, Mr. Rus Merritt. So sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode of Analogpod. Well, welcome, Russ. I'm delighted to have you with us today, and I'm honored to have you with us. And thank you for being a part of Analogpod. And we're excited to get to know you and know your rich history as a musician and as a human being. Okay. Let's make sure we add in the human being here. So
there you go.
Yeah. So let's jump right into it. I know most drummers, friends of mine, they started out pulling their mom and dad's or their mom's pots and pans out of the kitchen and pounding away with the spatula and all that stuff. And how did you get started?
Music is always, I truly believe music is probably in my DNA. My mother, she was a musician. She played the piano and she sang in the church choir. And even before I picked up an instrument, I had a really intimate relationship with music. Music was always in the house. And I can remember being in second and third grade with a little transistor AM radio always under my pillow when I went to bed, going to sleep, listening to radio stations, listening to music. But in the third grade, I took ukulele lessons and really understood how the body, the hands can take an object and make sound come out of it. That was my first experience with an instrument. Then I transitioned to saxophone in the fifth grade, and I really didn't fall in love with it. I fell in love with taking the music class, but I didn't fall in love with the saxophone. And I didn't like the idea that a lot of my friends saw that I was getting out of class early to go to music class, and they wanted to do the same thing. So that didn't make it fun because I couldn't focus. And then when I was in sixth grade at about 11 years old, back in 1974, I was on my way to the restroom, and I think it was Mr. Crenshaw's social studies class. And coming back, I found a pair of drumsticks on the ground, and it felt natural. I picked them up, and I'm like, this is destiny. This was meant to be. And my mother just so happened to work at the school. She made it so that I was able to, in the middle of the semester, join Mr. Autry's music class. And the music class was, it wasn't your typical music class because it was more like an orchestra setting. He had tons of kids in there playing all kinds of instruments, but the drums were the centerpiece. The drums were in the middle of a big giant room surrounded by all the other instruments. And fortunately, Mr. Autry liked me. And I liked him too. He was from the big band era. He played with Glenn Dorsey back in the day. And what was cool about Mr. Autry is that since it was that era, he come from that era, his focus was on the basics. So the one thing he did with me, even though drums weren't his original instrument, he made sure that I learned my rudiments. And he spent time with me, teaching me rudiments, teaching me how to hit the stick on the head of the drum, teaching me how to read little charts and little marching rudiment charts. And it made me feel like I belonged there. You know, even though I was just 11 years old and I was in the embryonic stages of trying to be a musician. In my head, I thought I was an awesome musician, but it just made me feel as if I had belonged there and I was at home in a music class, even though that was the only music class I've ever taken. I've never taken another music class after that. But that's where it started. Mr. Autry's music class at Sierra Mont Middle School in San Jose, California. I still think of him a lot. He's an amazing man.
Well, it's amazing. I think the interesting thing is possibly the backstory of you finding those drumsticks,
Right.
and who they belong to, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, yeah, I mean, there's a thousand things that go through my brain right now that think, you know, why would somebody leave a pair of drumsticks behind? So yeah, it's kind of destiny. So I personally am very grateful for that person
As am I. A debt of gratitude is old. That changed my life.
that left those drumsticks there for you to
Mm-hmm.
find.
Yeah.
Yes, that was awesome. And what how old did you say you were?
I was 11.
11. Okay.
And what was cool about it was Mr. Autry, he just told us what to do. And the first two songs I learned were Wipeout, the theme to Hawaii 5-0,
Yeah.
and Chicago 2964, I think 25. Yeah.
25.
And
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, 2564. Even to this day, when I hear 2564, I want to get behind a set of drums and just play it. That beat it, pow, pow. It just brings me back to a really, really cool time in my life. And the cool part of playing Wipeout with the Hawaii 5-0 theme is that, you know, it starts out with the drums. And you have to do that, and you have to do the roll. And if you couldn't do that, then you had a lot to work on. I took to it like a fish to water. His class was comprised of beginning, intermediate, and advanced, and I walked right into the intermediate part. Like I said, I felt as if I was at home taking that class.
That's that. Yeah, that's. I was attracted to drums only because, you know, I started playing bass at a very young age, but
Mm-hmm.
by the time I got to school in band, and you know, there wasn't a bass. But it was like a marching band, and
Right.
or a concert band,
Mm-hmm.
and so I wanted to play drums, but everybody wanted to play drums.
I know.
So it's like, okay, well, what's left? Well, there's a couple of there's a trumpet, and there's a trombone over here and over here. So
Mm-hmm.
I went and picked up the trumpet. So that's, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that was but I still played. So who were some of your early musical influences, Russ?
Aside from my mom, and aside from what I heard on Sunday at church on Sunday morning, if you want to talk about, you know, what I listened to on the radio or watched on TV, it was always Earth, Wind and Fire, Parliament, Funkadelic, Lakeside, Brass Construction, Tower of Power, Average White Band. You know, this was an era where real musicians played real instruments and performed those real instruments on stage. And they were my heroes. They were the men who I wanted to emulate. Earth, Wind and Fire, and well, actually, Parliament, Funkadelic. The one song at a very young age, because my mother, she sacrificed and was able to buy me a drum set, was Tear the Roof Off the Sucker, and it's a great bass and snare syncopation. And I figured if I can master that, then, you know, it's limitless. My potential is limitless. And again, to this day, you know, I love playing those songs. And, you know, I put my headphones on and get my phone out and just get lost in it.
Well,
But
it was the gold standard. I mean, you're
yeah,
talking about groups that were essentially the gold standard.
Right.
And you know, I'm a little bit older than you, a little bit older than you. But you know, when these bands, I didn't know, we didn't know anything else
No.
but these bands. Okay.
Right.
There weren't people that weren't playing their own instruments.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, there was a lot of stuff on the radio with the Wrecking Crew that, you know, when they go in to record, they would have these, you know, musicians, you know, and everybody you know, knows the story there. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the people that I look, you know, there were two groups, the Beatles and Chicago. That was pretty much my
Yeah.
gold standard. Okay,
Mhm.
and then Earth, Wind, and Fire, and I mean, it just you're just bringing back a
Yeah.
flood of memories for me.
Yeah.
And so, well, Russ, give me a little bit of a history when you started playing and you felt proficient enough. Your first band, give us a little history from your first band to
Mhm.
kind of where you are now.
Um, First real band was not a real band, but first experience with collaborating, if you will, with other musicians was in eighth grade. Um, Formed a band with Roy Brown was on saxophone, Steve Henderson was on bass, I was on drums, and Marcus Papillon, who he played guitar. Um, and the cool part about it is I'm still connected with these guys through social media. Fun fact: Marcus Papillon was the nephew of O.J. Simpson. I kind of want to insert that, but we stayed in our mother's basement. We never ventured out, and I want to say from that point through high school and college and young adult, growing up in the Bay Area, I had the opportunity, number one, to play in church a lot. Yeah, I was fortunate to do that, but it was at my young adult teen years. It was mostly just collaborating with a bunch of musicians that would come around. I was fortunate to, be playing at a high level for my age, that I would be able to play with older guys. Mm-hmm. And, I was always in awe of playing around highly skilled older musicians. Got married, and I put drums and music on the back burner to focus on the family. And then I want to say 9 years into the marriage, I just, like I said earlier, it's part of your DNA, and you can't ignore it. You can't deny it. You can't quit it. Bought a drum set, and I just put it out there to the universe, and I started playing again. I started playing in a rock band called Affinity Funk, and we played locally a lot on the Boardwalk, Press Club, Torch Club, festivals, events. But the guys in that band, they had other agendas, if you will, and we weren't able to progress as much as I had hoped we would. Then I used to go down to a spot in Midtown called Fox and Goose.
Yeah.
And every Monday night they had an open mic, and a lot of very creative musicians would pass through there. And I used to bring my congas, and I used to just sit in with different musicians. And I met a young lady named Molly Swank, and she wanted to put a band together, and we put a band together. And it was this was in the mid to late 90s. And this is when you still had real bands being played on the radio. Right. And so we formed a band, and we played around locally. And then she decided she wanted to be a mom and get married. And that was that. Then I just joined a bunch of cover bands, Point Blank, cover dance bands, Point Blank, Junk Funkies, Groove Thing, just playing locally, a lot of bars. And then I also played in a band called Love Train. That was a corporate wedding band. And then I started dabbling with the tribute band. Before that, I came across analog jazz and played with analog jazz for a little while. Then I went on to the Prince band, and then COVID hit, and now we're back, reunited.
It's one thing I can say good that came out of COVID was we were able to get you back. No, that's it. That's quite a bit.
It's a journey. It's been a journey.
Yeah. And the whole time you pretty much kind of kept a full-time job, right? I mean,
Yeah, I've always been gainfully employed, because unfortunately, the bills don't pay themselves. And, I've always, raising two kids who I'm very proud of right now. I've always had a day job. Yeah, always had a day job.
No, that's yeah. So, what talking about? Let's talk about your gear for a little bit. You as a drummer, there's a YouTube channel that I watch called Steve Maxwell Vintage Drums, and I'm not a drummer. Okay, I don't even, I have access to your drums, in our rehearsal space back there that I could probably sit down while you're not there and play them till my heart's content. But I'm not a drummer, but I'm fascinated because I'm a drummer is either to the left or to the right of me my entire life. So my relationship with the drums have always been so. Anyway, I'm fascinated, but it was interesting because we're talking about some of the influences and Buddy Rich was a phenomenal drummer. And
he's a template.
I was watching some of his videos. But the interesting thing about Steve Maxwell is that he has a drum set from 1969. It's a Rogers. But if you remember, Buddy Rich only played Slingerland.
Right.
So this is a very, 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 very rare drum set. And I was fascinated by the backstory. Like I said, backstories like this guy that left his drumsticks. I mean, you wonder if he's sitting on a video podcast going, you know what? I really wanted to be a drummer, but back when I was in school, I sat down and lost my drumsticks, and I never could find them. Right. Anyway, I'm fascinated with those backstories. But anyway, let's talk about your gear. You've got how many you've got? Four sets.
Four kits.
Tell us about your gear.
Temastar Classic is a 4-piece. And I have my the one at your house that we practice on. That's a PDP concept kit with a 14-inch kick, 16-inch kick. I'm sorry, that I really, really love, and I'm getting used to it. And I also have Ludwig Breakbeats, which is also a 14-inch kick. And then my go-to is my D-Dub Collector Series, Oxblood. It's a beautiful set. Sounds great. It's probably that's probably the last set I'll well, no, it's not the last set.
I'll say that.
But when I bought it, I thought that would be the last set that I would buy. The funny thing is the drum set that's in your rehearsal space, that's the only drum set that I've bought out the box, brand new. All my kit that I've bought has been used. Yeah. And I prefer that. I prefer a weathered, worn instrument, especially with the drums. Something with a little mileage on it, and especially if it's high quality. If it's a high quality instrument from a reputable manufacturer. Those are just drums. The cymbals I use Zildjian, and I have tons of cymbals. In my hardware, I use DW hardware, DW 9000 hardware. It's very, very heavy, but it's very durable. It's not going to crap out on you in the middle of a show or a middle rehearsal. It's dependable. And that's why I use the equipment that I use is I want it to be dependable. I want to rely on it. I want it to be a workhorse. And everything has a case. Everything is all my movable parts are always well lubricated and taken care of, because you never know. You never want it to, like I said, to take a crap on you. And you want to always rely on it. So it's just 4 kits right now, and maybe about 10 different snares, but it's all for show. They're just lined up in the garage just for show.
So I want to ask you about how many pairs of shoes you own.
Oh, is it that kind of podcast?
Well, no, let's not go there, because I know you're kind of a shoe whore. So
yeah, I got a few.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's I don't think I've ever seen you with the same pair of shoes on. So
You have.
yeah,
That's not
I
true.
have.
Yeah.
I just gotta. Yeah. But you know what, you were talking about the equipment, and I think the only guitar that I think I've ever bought brand new was actually sitting right behind me, right
Mm-hmm.
there, that Hofner. When Hofner decided to reissue the '64 Beetle bass, I thought, I got to get one of those. I got to get one of those.
And they were a recent reissue, so they didn't have any new ones out there.
No, there was no. I mean, and the '64s. I mean, you couldn't get a hold of them, or if you could, they were so out of my price range. I mean, forget
Okay.
about it. It's just not even, And you know the interesting thing about the Hofner, they're not. They're really a very, very inexpensive bass. Okay, they
Mm-hmm.
are handmade. That thing right
Nice.
there has a person has made everything on that bass.
Nice.
But everything else I've ever bought was used, and
Mm-hmm.
because it's like I call it mojo.
Mm-hmm.
And you sit down with a guitar, with a bass, and the minute you put it next to you, okay.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, I'm not the only person like this, but as soon as you put that bass next to you, and you kind of, if you belong to that, okay,
Right.
or if it belongs to you, okay,
Yes.
because there's some basses that it's like, nah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you can have this. I don't care how nice it is or what brand it is. So I'm assuming it's probably about like the drums, right?
Yes. You want to. The one thing I look for when I sit behind a set of drums is that warmth, obviously, and the tone. And just like any instrument, there's a ergonomic aspect to it. It's like some basses are low. I don't know, you're like right in the middle. Some basses are really high. The drums, I just want to be comfortable behind a set. And I want everything to be ergonomically within my reach where I can have maximum impact. If that cymbal's right over there, I know if I go like that, boom, I'm going to get the maximum impact. So sitting behind a drum set, you want to feel like, okay, this is it. It's like putting on a nice pair of shoes, and they just fit just right. So you just want to, when I'll just put it that way. It's hard to describe.
It's
When
the mojo. It's the mojo. You just know. Yeah. You just know.
You just know.
We've been producing these videos for Analog Jazz, which you can check out on the Analog Jazz portal on YouTube if you want to go see them. But I notice that when you play, there's sometimes your head is down.
Yeah.
And you're just doing this. So when you said, the ergonomical thing, I mean, you're not looking, you're not looking up to go, oh, the drum is there. No, you're just going boom, 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 boom. And it's funny you bring that up because I just noticed actually the other day when I was editing one of the videos, and I just sat there and go, this guy just, okay, either he knows or he's guessing, and he's doing really good at guessing.
No, you get to the point where you're so familiar with your little intimate surroundings that you can play with your eyes closed, and you know where everything is, and a lot of the sound that you get out of the drum is obviously with the impact. Impact is dependent on the distance. If I'm further away from that drum, I'm not going to have maximum impact. And it's odd, or it's cool how you get to the point to eventually you can just sit with your eyes closed and just play everything with your eyes closed and just have maximum impact. Another reason I play with my head down is when I look up, I tend to lose focus. I'll look up every once in a while, like looking for you or the keyboard player or Dave to give me a cue or whatever. But for the most part, if I'm playing, my head is down because I am actively listening to what's going on. And I try to minimize the distractions. My job is to be the heartbeat of the band. and that heartbeat should not waver. I have to stay within the four corners of the tempo. I can't waver. A lot of drummers need to understand is if they play too fast, that impacts, if you have a vocalist that has a lot of lyrics in 4 bars, or that impacts that vocalist ability, that impacts the vocalist's ability to sing the song correctly. Or same with a keyboard player, if they're playing scales, they have to go faster and faster. They don't want to do that. Or bass, he has to go faster. So my reason for playing with my head down is I just want to meet your expectations as it relates to being the heartbeat of the band. And if I'm looking around and trying to be seen and, hey, everybody look at me, I lose that. You lose that focus and things are compromised at that point. So there's looking down it's intentional. Leonard, it is intentional.
Well, it's amazing, and we've had this conversation before. Which I mean, I've had the opportunity to honestly, I consider it a blessing and an opportunity to play
likewise
with the various drummers that I have played with, you included. And I would say probably on a scale, and I revised my scale since I think the last time we talked. I would say truly, honestly, the best drummer that I have ever played with is you.
Leonard, you're far too kind. And I know you played with a lot of cats.
Yeah, no, it's once I got thinking about when we had that conversation, I kind of think I thought, okay, I'm counting, I'm looking back at all. In fact, one of the drummers we had, I'm hoping to get him on the podcast on Analog Pod is Bruce Getke. He was blind.
Whoa!
Now you're talking about putting your head down.
Yeah,
he was blind. Okay.
Wow.
And he had this Tama double kit. I mean, he had drums everywhere. It looked like Neil Peart. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, and he even had a gong behind it. Okay.
It was blind.
Yeah, it was blind. And to this day, he's running a studio and he's still doing some recordings and different things like that. But he was blind, and it was interesting because, when you're walking on stage, usually when you walk up to they're portable stages, and they're the stairs are janky, and you're walking up, and since I was the last one on the stage, while the rest of the people, I had to guide him up. Okay.
Wow.
So he had to put his arm in mine, and I guided him up the stairs, and I walked him over to the drum set. And once he sat down, he was boom, he was there. He knew exactly there. I mean, he was picked up his sticks, he was there. I walked over to my bass and said, but he was a phenomenal drummer for the sake that the fact, I mean, he had this obviously he had this handicap.
Yeah.
Yet that didn't stop him, man.
No, that's amazing.
But I will say this: you were my number one. Okay.
Well, thank you, Leonard.
And I know there's some drummers out there that are probably going to go. Next time I see you, Carillo. So anyway, so listen on the 10,000 hour scale, and I know we've talked about this in the past. On the 10,000 hour scale, where do you feel you are on that scale? Yeah, maybe this way.
I still think I'm bumping up against 7,500, 8,000 hour, because I did take a break. It was interrupted. My journey was interrupted for about 9 years, and I'm still playing catch up. And side note, I tried to quit music. There was a time where my kids were, I don't know, in high school, and I was heavily involved in what they were doing, and I wasn't in a band at the time, and the drums were just sitting there. And I said, you know what? I need to clear up some emotional shelf space. Let me stop worrying about music and focus on, shepherding my kids through their journey. And I have a cousin who plays drums, and I called him up. I said, hey, Jeremy, I got this beautiful Yamaha kit. I know you don't have a drum set right now, and know you're playing on mom's pots and pans. How about I give you everything I have? And he couldn't believe it. He was in high school at the time, and he's an amazing musician, by the way. I'm very proud of my cousin Jeremy. So the plan was for me to drive to my mom's house, drop the drums off there, and his grandfather was going to pick the drums up from my mom's house and give them to him. That's fine. My mom lived in Vallejo. So got off work, packed up the drums, put them in my car, and it hit me. It hit me. And I started driving to my mom's house in Vallejo from Sacramento, and I don't think I stopped crying. I couldn't stop crying. But I had committed. Yeah. I made a commitment to my younger cousin. So I got to my mom's house. I unloaded the drums. I stacked them up in her garage. And I was saying goodbye. And I hugged her really hard. And I started crying. She said, "Why are you crying?" And I said, I felt like a piece of me just died. Mm. And I couldn't believe that I was walking away from something that I thought I'd never, ever leave. But I did. And I felt good. I focused on the fact that I was paying it forward. I was giving my tools to somebody, an aspiring artist. But there was still a little flame left inside. And I tried to deny it, but I couldn't. And about 8 months later, I bought another set of drums. So,
well, they're the tools. They're the tools. You're the embodiment. So, I mean, you just gave up some tools. But I know, I mean, there was a period in my life when when I'd gotten off the road and my wife, me and my wife had started having kids, and our boys were in Little League. Well, I decided, okay, I'm going to focus my energy and I'm going to coach the Little League team. Well, I did that for about 2 years, and I found out that I was a better bass player than I was a coach. So I got too emotional on the field. I was one of those parents that that you hated because they were always. But see, I was the coach, so I was always putting my kids in. But anyway, but yeah, you know what? It's interesting because when you brought that up, a piece of it. I think when it hit me, when it really hit me, I had an uncle. His name was David, and he was a phenomenal guitar player. In fact, my whole lineage, my parents, my mom's side, and my father's side, I came from a music family. I mean, we had music. I mean, my grandfather played bass, the guitarrón in the mariachi band. Nice. My grandmother, in fact, I still have her 1941 Gretsch acoustic guitar. Wow. I should probably get that out and have it out. But yeah. I was around music. But I remember when my Uncle David died, and we went to the funeral, and I saw him laying in the casket. Okay, and I walked over to him, and he had his hands, like they lay in caskets. He had his hands, and I looked at those hands, and I went, "Those hands used to play
right
so beautifully, and it's like they're
silent."
Yeah. So I remember I brought a pick with me, and I wanted to put it in his hand, and so I just slipped it in his hand, but it dawned on me, it's like it's in us.
Yeah.
These things are just tools. And honestly, if something ever happened to me, if I lost a hand or something, I would still probably try to find a way to play. But yeah, it's in us, and it's in us. And I truly believe it's a God-given thing that He puts in us that we have, that you just can't. It's in our DNA. You just can't do it. So
can't deny it.
Yeah, but so let me ask you this: if you could give any advice you could to a young drummer or musician coming up, what would you say?
Actually, I would give the advice to the parent. If a kid, if a young person is led to an instrument, if a young person develops that passion, just like you did, just like I did, just like a lot of my friends did, it's important and it's incumbent upon the parent to support that 100%. My mom made sacrifices for me to get behind a set of drums, and I'm forever grateful for that, and I honor that. I would have a conversation with the parent and I say, look, you got something special right there. You may want to consider making, the investments. You may want to consider learning how to nurture and foster that gift. I look at Chris Jackson, our keyboard player, as an example. His youngest son, Tyler, is a drummer, and he's going to be a phenomenal musician one day. He has a hunger and a desire and a thirst for it. He loves playing. And I admire Chris and his wife's dedication to that kid's passion. The kid finding the instrument, that's the easy part. The support that he is surrounded with, that's the hard part. Yeah. A lot of parents make the mistake and not show an interest in what their kid might be interested in. And then that flame kind of flickers out at a young age. So I would have a conversation with that kid's support base and encourage them to be the parent that kid deserves as it relates to their development as a musician. But if I were talking to a little kid, a musician, if I were to have a conversation with a drummer, young drummer, my advice to that drummer is to immerse yourself in the music. Yes, you play drums. You are a drummer, but you're the heartbeat of what's going on. You're not part of the melodic process, but in a way, you play an important role in supporting it. Immerse yourself in the music. Learn how to play with different musicians. And we talked about it before. It's the soy sauce rule. As a drummer, it's so important. Soy sauce can make too much soy. The right amount of soy sauce will make a meal taste great. Mm-hmm. Put too little on it, it's bland. Too much on it, it's too strong. So learn the soy sauce rule. Just put the right amount where it belongs. Another important thing for any young drummer is to expose your mind and your ears to all different type of genres. Yeah. You don't know what your genre is. You really don't. I grew up in a household where the predominant sound that was coming out of the big giant stereo was R&B and some classical. So I'm glad that I'm not a complete product of my environment, because if I were a complete product of my environment, I would not have been able to play with a lot of the musicians that I've played with. So my recommendation to a young drummer is to learn how to be adaptable to different genres of music. Learn how to play. You can't play an R&B song the same way you can play a metal song, obviously. And being a little bit more granular, you can't play an R&B song the same way we play some of our jazz tunes. So be versatile, immerse yourself in the music, understand your role as the heartbeat of the band, and shine. Just shine. And I am bumping up against 58 years old, and I'm still learning. Mm-hmm. Every time I sit behind a set of drums, I find that I'm doing something differently that I never did to the music. And it might go unnoticed by everybody else in the room, but I'm still learning. I'm still listening. I'm still looking at the YouTube videos. I was telling Chris Jackson the other day, I'm considering taking lessons from a guy at our church. And that's a result of a passion for what we do. We say it's in our DNA, but let's take it a step further. It's a gift from God. It's and with respect to the fact that God blessed us with certain gifts and talents, we want to honor that by doing the best that we could possibly do. That's something else I would tell a kid. What you have a gift, you have a talent. God chose you to do this. What are you going to do? How are you going to honor that? So that's a conversation I would have with the kid and maybe that kid's parent.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there's so much there. We could probably spend all night just unpacking some of the things you said, but I was, a real quick story, years and years and years and years and years ago, a very, very good guitar player by the name of Larry Blackburn, country western guitar player. He came to me one day, and he said, "Leonard," he goes, "I need your help." I said, "Okay, what can I do?" "What can I do to help you?" He says, I'd like you to talk to my son. I said, "Okay." I said, what kind of conversation would you like me to have with your son? And he says, I started teaching him how to play bass, but he's lost interest. And I said, okay. I said, well, kids that certain age, because I think he was probably, 13, 14 years old. I said, kids that, they're still figuring stuff out. And he goes, yeah, he says, but, he says, I think you might be able to help. Leonard, you've been playing a long time. And I said, yeah, I said, okay. I said, no, I said, sure. So anyway, I went over to his house, and the kid wasn't home. And so we're actually standing out in the carport. And the kid comes pulling up on the skateboard. And I said, object lesson right here. So, and I knew the kid, so it wasn't like I'd never met him before, because I knew Larry, and so I went to him and I told him, I think his name was Lonnie, actually, even. I said, Lonnie, I said, hey, I said, got a question to ask you. I said, how's the bass coming along? He goes, he says, I just got other. I said, well, what's going on? I just got other things. I said, yeah. I said, like I said, you want to get really good at that skateboard, huh? And he goes, yeah, that's what I'm really kind of focusing on right now. I said, okay. I said, all right. Well, let me ask you this. When you get old, how well do you think you'll be able to ride that skateboard?
Yeah.
Okay. And I was in my 20s back then, so it wasn't like I was old. Okay. I told him, I said, when I get old, I won't be able to ride a skateboard, but I'll still be able to play that bass.
Anytime you want. That's right.
As long as these keep working.
Yeah.
This keeps working. Okay. And he kind of sat there and he went, So a couple of weeks later, I ran into Larry. We're doing something. I don't remember what it was, but I said, hey, how's Lonnie doing? And he goes, oh, he said, Leonard, I don't know what you said to him, because actually Larry had gone inside, and he said, I don't know what you said to him, but man, he says, after you left, I mean, he came in and picked up that bass and said, Dad, why don't you can you work with me a little bit? And so anyway, I would be very anxious to know if Lonnie's still playing the bass today, but no, I think what you said, as far as the parents, talking with the parents to say, hey, listen, I encouraged all my boys, my boys play guitar, very, very well. My one son plays guitar, the keyboards, and drums.
Nice.
And so they're, it's kind of, so anyway, next, by the way, that was gold what you said there. Next subject we could probably spend a couple hours on, but we won't.
Was that?
Okay. This is, how do you feel about the music being produced today?
Well, it goes without saying that it's the generational difference from what you and I were influenced by and what you and I were exposed to growing up. You have a lot of talent out there, but I'm doing my best to be kind because I don't want to offend anybody. Like I said, there's a ton of talent out there. It really is. But it's just, in my opinion, it's incredibly synthetic. It's not organic, and it's sad sometimes when I think about someone can just go buy a $800 laptop, buy $120 worth of software and a microphone, and produce an album, a good sounding album, in his comfort of his own home. Something that he or she could do something today that, Leonard, when you and I were growing up, we had to call the guitar player, call the drummer, where we're going to rehearse, who's going to write the songs, who's going to do this,
Going to a studio.
Yeah, going to a studio and paying for it by the hour.
Yes.
So paying handsomely for it by the hour.
Got to get that block time.
Right, exactly. And right now, it's just evolved into something that I never saw coming. I used to love watching the Grammys, but now I don't. It's unrecognizable to me. And I'm not saying I'm not disrespecting anybody, but the music scene is unrecognizable to me. That's why of the 6,000 songs that are on my iPod, I want to say the oldest one, or the newest one, I should say, is about 15 years. Yeah. Maybe 10 or 15 years old. I just, other than praise and worship, that genre, where you do have real musicians playing real instruments and playing and singing and performing with a great deal of passion. Independent of that genre, the young kids right now, I feel bad for them because they don't have the luxury of being influenced the way you and I were. Yeah. They don't have the luxury of I'm pretty sure when you were growing up, you looked at a particular bass player, or looked at Paul McCartney and say, hey, that's my dude. I want to be like him.
That was it. That was the gold standard there.
Yeah. 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 When I was younger, I looked at drummers and those were my heroes. I had posters of the drummers on my wall, and their drum sets. And that's, you can't, young kids don't have that, much of that these days. There's some of it, but the quality of music right now, it just doesn't fit what I look for. There's an audience for it, but I'm just not part of that audience. So
yeah, no, it's interesting because we've had this conversation. It's like, I was just recently watching a documentary on Tom Petty, and I can quote him because obviously he's passed, so he can't come and get me. But he said the music today, he says, what is happening is we're rewarding mediocrity.
Yeah, we are.
We're rewarding. In other words, we're making some of these people multi-millionaires out of mediocrity.
And you see a lot of artists out there. The sad part about it is none of them have original ideas anymore.
Yeah. Even they're taking loops from older songs,
right,
and incorporating them. And I think there's a price. Russ. I mean, as you were talking about it, I kind of thought, what the thought that came to my mind is there's a price to be paid.
Yeah.
Okay. And there will be a price that has to be paid or will be paid by the fact that kids growing up, I mean, we had, I mean, some of the bands you listed earlier on in the conversation that were your idols, you know, the Tower of Power, the Earth, Wind and Fire, I just go, I did not know that they were there. They were always there. They're not there now. And in fact, I think you brought it up in a conversation we had. You said, Leonard, there's no R&B band right now.
No, there are no R&B bands.
There's no band.
You have singers, groups, and I don't call them boy bands because I look at a band as, okay, what instrument do you play? What do you play? What instrument do you play? I don't call them bands. There are no bands. There are no R&B bands. And that's, to me, is sad. But we, thank God for YouTube and old tapes and CDs and albums that we have. It hasn't died. It's just that we've run out of original ideas when it comes to music, unfortunately. A lot of artists right now, like you said, they're sampling a lot of the original stuff that we grew up listening to. Not only sampling it, but also emulating, trying to emulate the artists themselves. But nobody has an original idea. And it's sad that when an artist does have an original idea, they might not fit the image or the mold that's going to sell, but they have original ideas. They actually write amazing songs and they have talent, but image-wise, they may not fit the mold and they don't sell. So it's unfortunate.
Well, yeah, it's like you don't get your musicians from game shows. And that's really kind of what I think is what's happened. Yeah. It's like, well, if I can get on a particular game show, I'll be a rock star, I'll be a pop star, I'll be this, and this, and I just sit there and go, what about the 1,000 hours?
Where's that? Yeah.
They may have the talent, okay, but they needed to be, that's one thing I love about playing music. As long as I have, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of different producers, and it's a love hate situation with producers.
Right.
Okay? You either love them or you hate them, or you love them one day and you hate them the next day, or vice versa, whatever, because what they're doing is that they're pushing you to get the best, to facilitate the song. Okay. Right. And not okay, and not what, it's always scared me when I've gone into a studio and there's no producer involved. Like, where's the objectivity? Okay, somebody has to be able to go, no, yes,
right.
Oh yeah, right. Really good, or no, that's not going to work.
Not so much. Yeah,
that's not going to work. And I've learned to rely on that. I've just been fortunate that some of the producers I've worked with have been very very kind, as well as supportive. I remember Terry Scott Taylor produced one of the albums I was on, and we started tracking, and he walked out of the control booth and he walked into the room where I was at, and he goes, here, he handed me a pick. He says, I want you to play this song with a pick, and I want you to drive it instead of, because I normally play with my fingers. He goes, I want you to drive it. Da, 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 da. And I told him, I said, I have never used a pick before.
Not on bass, no.
I said, I have never used a pick before. And I said, and we're recording, okay? This is going to, he says, okay. He says, all right. Okay, then we're gonna cut this part out. He says, I want you to go back to the hotel. I want you to spend time with that pick. Learn this song playing that pick. I tell you what, I could have strangled him because I had spent so much time learning that song, with my fingers because I was just the normal. Okay, now I had to switch it up.
Mm-hmm.
So while the rest of the guys were out, and I think they were doing stuff on the album, I was back in the hotel learning the song on the cassette player with a pick. So I came back determined that I was going to. So anyway, that's the only, honestly, I think that's the only bad experience I had. And it wasn't really a bad experience because when I listened to the album, in fact, I just pulled the album out a couple of weeks ago and put that track on because I thought I wanted to hear this. I thought, wow, did I do that? So anyway, I just, today's, like I spent most of the day listening to Aretha Franklin.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It just doesn't get any better. I mean, yeah. I mean, what else do you say? Okay, when you're diving into that pot,
right?
Okay,
right.
Well thought out mixture of vocals, and then her background singers, as well as the various musicians that she used on. It was just, you just sit there and go, we're not doing that today.
No.
We're not doing that today. Well, first of all, there's no record company. Well, there's record companies, but they're not going, hey, let's invest. Okay. Let's invest in the producers that are going to say, let's get out of that song. The very absolute best that we can get out of it. I mean, we've got pop artists right now that are producing their own, which is fine. But guess what? Okay, they become very myopic.
Yes.
So and I know this is probably not going to bode well with a lot of viewers that are like, oh, this particular art, oh, she's the best, oh, she's the absolute best. Well, she could probably be better. Yeah, she's great. And I won't mention any names because I don't want to hate letters or comments below. Say how much they hate me. But I mean, you think how much more they could be. Yeah. Anyway, so but no, we're tracking and I know even what we do here with Analog Jazz is that we're constantly trying to figure out what works.
Yes.
What works with our audience, as well as what is fun for us to play, okay? And that we enjoy playing. And it's so funny because we always keep reaching back. We don't reach forward. In fact, on one of our CDs, there's a song on there, and I'll keep that even anonymous. I can't stand that song.
Which one is that?
I don't want to say. Do you have the CD there?
I do not.
Oh, okay. You were looking down. I thought maybe you were looking at this. Okay. I'll just be anonymous. I'll just keep the song anonymous. I can't stand this song. And I'm so glad that it's off of our repertoire. It's off of our list. We don't even play it. But I just sat there, and because that was one of the songs that we reached forward and said, hey, well, everybody's listening to that. Everybody thinks that's a great song. So let's do our version of it. Okay. Well, anyway, it turned out to be whatever. So anyway, let's change subject here. So, okay. Famous musicians. Famous musicians that if you had the opportunity to play with, and whether they are dead or alive, who would your top three be?
Prince, and Prince.
Okay.
No, kidding.
Don't forget Prince.
And then there's Prince always. He would probably kindly ask me off the stage. I am so not at that level, but as far as an artist that I truly, truly, truly admire and look up to, it's Prince. Prince, if you look at his career, started in 79 until his death in 2016. Constantly evolved, constantly reinvented himself. He constantly did things to stay relevant, but at the same time, stay true to himself, never selling out. When he first signed his contract with Warner Brothers, he signed it with the stipulation that he produced it at 19 years old, and he played every single instrument at 19 years old, and he sang all the lead and backing tracks on his very first album. There's not a 19-year-old person that and at that time, this was where record labels were huge. You know, it was all about the record labels. They had all the money and they invested it wisely. And there were not a lot of record labels at the time that was going to take a chance on a 19-year-old unproven kid, you know, give him the keys to the Ferrari and say, okay, I need you to produce an album.
Yeah.
I need you to come up with an album. And he did. He rose to the occasion and he never looked back since up until the time of his death. Prince has my admiration for his undying creativity. He stayed creative. He was always creative. Here's the thing. When I listen to a song, there's only one thing I want to hear when I hear that song. And that's something I haven't heard before. When I'll never forget it when Doves Cry, when I first heard that on the radio, I'm like, what is this? There's no bass line. What are you doing? When's the song gonna develop? You know, when is it gonna be meaningful? When are you gonna grab it? It did, and I didn't know it. You know, because it was unconventional. Ran to Tower Records, bought that album, went home, dropped the needle, and was just blown away. I remember putting that album back in the sleeve, running up to my friend Alan's house and said, bruh, you got to hear this. You have got to hear this. And threw it on his turntable, and we were just blown away. And when you have an artist like that, or when I align myself to an artist like that, there's a certain anticipation every year or a year and a half of what's he going to do next? What's around the next corner? And that's why I go back to constantly reinventing himself and at the same time staying relevant. Another artist is David Bowie. David Bowie's career, that's all he did was reinvent himself. It's like every single day he reinvented himself and stayed relevant at the same time and made some amazing music. I would have loved to have sat in with David Bowie. I would have loved to, with David Bowie and Prince, I would have loved to have just been a fly on the wall in the creative process. You know, when you're writing an amazing song like when Purple Rain, I would just want to sit there and just watch. Okay, this note's going to go here. I need some space right there. It's going to build up. It's going to tension and release. And I would just love to observe the creative process from a creative mind like that. Peter Gabriel, love Peter Gabriel. Yep. Dave Matthews Band, love Dave Matthews Band. I was blown away with Dave when they first hit the scene, because you look at that band, it's all acoustic, except for the bass player. And each and every musician in that band can carry the band. They can do solos and do them, you know, really, really well. There's a lot of artists out there. You know, unfortunately, a lot of them are gone. A lot of them, you know, their careers have come and gone. But I love a great songwriter. I love a great composer. Sting is an amazing composer. You talk about somebody who will diligently adhere and strictly adhere to the structural rules of songwriting. If you listen to any Sting song, and just sit back and just observe, you know, the movement, you know, the note placement, the story that's being told, and how it resolves at the end of the song. You know, Sting is an amazing songwriter. And if you notice, the David Bowies, the Princes, the Stings, the Dave Matthews, Peter Gabriel's, all those musicians that I just named, they all had phenomenal drummers. They all had phenomenal drummers. And it says something when an artist like a Sting or Peter Gabriel or David Bowie or Prince, Dave Matthews, they have the draw to surround themselves with great talent. Prince was notorious. He changed his band I don't know how many times.
Oh yeah.
But he always had world-class musicians, and he brought out the best in them. Sting brings out the best in the musicians that he surrounds himself with. I just really I go back to, a great songwriter, a great composer, somebody who's going to stick with the structural rules of songwriting. Have an intro, have a verse, have a chorus, a pre-chorus, a chorus, and verse two, then a bridge, and verse and chorus and outro, and just put that together. String that together. Oh, and that's a challenge that I have to these kids. If you listen to a lot of music right now, it's, to me, and maybe I'm using the wrong word for it, but it's just linear. You have the same beat and you'll have the same notes and the same melody. And the only distinction from the verse and the bridge and the chorus is what the vocalist is doing. But the music behind that stays the same. And there might be some variances when the bridge kicks in, or if there's a chorus. If there's a bridge. A lot of these songs don't have bridges. They just have verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus, out.
Well, I think, it's interesting because one of the things Lee Sklar said, a very, very famous bass player, been played on with everybody. He says, it's interesting, and I think you bring up a point. In order to break the rules, you must know the rules.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of kids out there that they're breaking the rules, but they don't know what the rule was.
No.
Well, we don't need to add that bridge. No, we don't. No, let's just do this. But in order to be able to break the rules, you've got to know the rules.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
In other words, the structure, the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really what it all leads up, is the foundation. And, that's one of the problems that we have, is because we have the laptops, we've got the Pro Tools, we've got all the plugins that you can, because we're experimenting with some of that right now, the plugins and different things. And, the accessibility, you don't need a studio anymore. There's still some phenomenal studios out there that are still incredible, but it's just, but anyway, so
yeah.
But listen, let's have some fun, and then I'm going to let you go, because I know you've given me a lot of time here, and I really, really appreciate that. So the fun question I like to ask all my guests this, okay, towards the end of the interview: if you were stranded on a desert island and you could only take with you 3 albums,
not box sets,
what would those? No, just 3 albums. I don't care if they're double or just 3 albums. Just 3 albums.
Sign of the Times, Peter Gabriel, So. Another one, just a sec. Santana, Supernatural. That's another one.
Oh yeah.
He paints with a broad brush on that album. But Prince, Sign of the Times, Peter Gabriel, So, and probably Santana, Supernatural.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. How about you?
Well, that's yeah. No, we don't. That's another hour. Look at my CD. Look at all my CDs back there.
I hear you.
It's like, which one do you? I know a Steely Dan would be in there. Absolutely.
Okay. And phenomenal musicians.
And a Beatles.
Okay.
Anyway, so it's so hilarious. But anyway, that's funny, because no guest has ever asked me what I would take. No, I'm the one sending you to the island. So
okay.
So
all right.
Well, listen, Russ, I tell you what, it has been an absolute honor to number one, be your bandmate as well
Likewise.
as a friend, and get to know you a little bit better. Let the audience know who you are and who I get to hang with every week. And we're looking for the venues to open up so we can get out there and start playing, because we're getting the emails from our followers. I call them followers. I guess they're fans, wondering when we're going to play next.
Yeah,
So I'm excited to know that they haven't forgot us, and we're doing our best to try not to let them forget us.
right.
Using videos and different things, and obviously this podcast and this video podcast. And for those that want to check out some of our latest videos, are what we call analog rehearsal videos.
Yeah, that's been fun.
You can see us in the raw, and I don't mean we have all of our clothes on.
Yeah,
you can kind of see us in the raw, and you can just go to Analog Jazz on YouTube. We have a portal there, so you can check that out. I'll put the link down right here somewhere. But anyway, well, Russ, thank you for being with us tonight, and ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. I'm your host, Leonard Carillo, and you've been watching Analogpod. And until next time, we will see you down the road.